Suggested the title like that. That means it's not a very descriptive exposition, because last year we did it for 2 hours, whereas this year we are engaging only within an hour. Maybe by 3:15 we will try to wind up. You are seeing the slide because first session which we just did with, so second is going to be this. Let us just dwell on the concept of research itself. We know that research is the close searching. The search, the very word search comes from the Latin word circare, which is about circulating, circle, the going round and round and round. Sometimes PhD research or any research seems like that. Those who have been there will agree with me that research is that kind of not knowing where to go further. Sometimes you are in a kind of dungeon, dark kind of path. So you have to carve out your way, and sometimes you tend to lose your path also. You may deviate, you may engage in details which are unnecessary. So constant decision making, filtering, etc. are part of this search. That's why research is a rigorous search, it's a thorough search. If you compare it with India Samshodhan, it is Samyak Shodhan, means a thorough search. So it's also not only searching something out there, it is also an insight. From time to time, that reflection is very important. That kind of time you have to give to yourself every day. Instead of sitting once in a month and reflecting on your topic for whole day, daily you reflect on your topic for 10 minutes. It is said that it has better beneficial effects, because earlier we discussed about neurobiology. Our brain is such a plastic, it has such plasticity that you guide it and it recognizes, and you are able to do wonders with this mammalian equipment. So that's what we'll have to bear in mind. Second is, research is not simply search and not simply a venture of gathering information. It is systematic study and or investigation of existing knowledge or facts for finding some truth or reality. Just take a pause and see. We are finding facts. A newspaper reporter also finds facts. A student also finds fact when the student is writing an essay or trying to find an answer to a question, etc. What is the difference between a systematic research and simply searching for or trying to find some truth? The difference is that the framework of methodology that we use and we are trained in, which makes research a little more rigorous exercise. Not that media people don't do the research, they also do their research. They put all facts together and they try to answer one question. So for different purposes people do research. Whereas as legal researchers, when we do research, predominant area of legal research has been the Manupatra kind of research, where you have the big data which are about putting the legal material together, the legal data together. But that is not the kind of research that we all in this room are engaged with. We are engaged with slightly more systematic kind of investigation into a question or a fact that we have embarked our journey upon. So we are trying to find some truth or reality. We'll go back to it later on, in a more detailed way with the examples. Like we had in our group some people talking about their research, like performance indicators for judging the performance of judges or judging the performance of courts. Court performance and judges performance, are they two different things? Of course they are, because court is an organization, judge is an individual. Individual is part of the organization. That individual's work may have to do with some facets of the organization, but the one is not synonymous with the other. So this way we engage in that thought process. We try to arrive at a clarity by constantly asking questions, by holding on to certain truths, by eliminating certain other truths. It is like, it is said the entire journey is like blind men or blind people trying to gauge the elephant, the so-called blind people trying to gauge the elephant. I think that kind of description is where even us, rest of us who are not physically blind could be mentally blind as well. Like in truth, it's a like elephant, it is a mammoth possibility. But from the perspective from where we are trying to reach this elephant of truth, we may be also making a mistake of mistaking the tail of the elephant to be the elephant. So in order to avoid such mistake, it's very important that we have a larger concept of elephant to emerge as a possibility in our mind. Means we should, one is that those who have touched the elephant earlier could guide us. Second is that those who have touched but they have left no records, then there is no use. You will be reinventing that journey. So such all possibilities exist when we do a research. Now, truth, when we were taught by Professor Bhatt and his teacher, who was my professor, he always said that ultimate truth is a big capital T, and all smaller truths are T, small t's of varied size, which will reach us to that. The ultimate truth is never there. It is elusive, because farther you go, truth still unveils itself. So, somewhere for the purpose of your degree, or for the purpose of your book, or for the purpose of your article, you only will have to create that framework. Sometimes framework is created by words, sometimes it is created by the number of samples that you may want to examine, sometimes it is created by the time frame during which you want to observe this phenomenon, or sometimes it may be a research which is regionally, geographically limited, sometimes a research which is thematically limited. So you yourself create that framework to make the research feasible, workable, right?
Ma'am, I have one doubt.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yeah, please.
Does research mean research or research again? Number one. Number two, whether essay writing or maybe some kind of storytelling can be really considered as a research?
Could be. See, research, the word research is because the search is a rigorous search. A search could be revisiting something. I'll give you an example. I had come across a health communication research in Ireland, which was about the patient experience with the medical treatment. There were 40 people who were interviewed to find out, it was a qualitative research, to find out how did they experience this doctor-patient interface. 20 years later, another researcher repeated the same methodology, same approach, but with a different set of patients. 20 years later, technology would have changed, diagnostic methods would have changed, doctor's qualification would have changed, affordability of the patients would have changed. So many factors have changed. So if you're calling it as repeat, then is it still a research? It is still a research because the framework is different. Second question, whether story can be a research. Telling a story in an innovative way is a kind of communication. But, or when you write it down, then it is a kind of literature. But research about the story can happen. Story in itself may not be a research, but story may have certain elements of discovery or innovation which may make that story to stand out. So your research will reveal. I'll give you an example. We had this famous dialogue once, the Three Little Pigs story. I read the Three Little Pigs story in Ireland. I used to read it out to my infant son at that time. Now the story was like this, that there were three little pigs. When they became of adolescent age, the mother packs some food and gives some money, and she says, now you are independent, go and live on your own. So the first pig goes and builds a house of straw. Second pig goes and builds a house of wood. Then the third pig builds a stronger house with bricks and all that. So the first pig gets galloped by a wolf. Then that wolf in the vicinity next raids the house of the second pig and finishes him also. The third one happily enjoys the fact that he had a stronger house and his vision was great because the wolf could not enter that house. So the wolf tries to come down from the chimney and this guy sets the wolf on fire and kills him. And he enjoys that supremacy. But 3 years later when I came to India, I came across a Three Little Pig storybook. So I opened. In that story, the first pig, second pig and third pig build houses closer to each other. They plan to build first. Then they decide that, okay, according to my affordability, same thing. My one is a straw house, the other is wood house, the third guy with the brick house. Then the first guy comes to know that there is a wolf in the vicinity. He goes and informs the second one. Then the first and the second one decide let's not stay in those houses because they are too brittle. Wolf may finish us off. Why don't we go to our brother's house, which is a stronger house? So both the wolves finally go and land there, both the pigs, and the 3 pigs together finish off the wolf with the same technique of burning him through the chimney. Now what does this story indicate? A story which is originated in the West and a story which is originated in the East. Maybe the Western story itself, but in the East how it gets transformed. I mean, this doesn't talk about our propensity to create counterfeit, but our propensity to be innovative, our propensity to be culturally conducive. So, if American sells a material for $100, we'll create the same material for 100 rupees. That is our innovation. So, in story also, you can always discover elements and you can apply the methodology. If I were to be somebody who was understanding semiotics, I will see the symbolism of these houses, I will see the symbolism of the 3 pigs, I would also try to do the hermeneutic interpretation of the story in terms of cultural values, communitarian values, joint family, and independence as limited, self-limiting on independence for welfare. You know, so many. You can see the political value, you can see the economic value. There are multiple interpretations which are possible to the same story, and the way in which the Western story affects the Western story incorporates those values. Like I used to take these discourses in children's camps and all, and we used to see wonderful responses from children. So this is where you see that even a story can be a subject of research.
My question is compilation of data from different sources like internet, right? And then treating it as a research like most of the PhD theses is.
Yeah, compilation is not research. Mere compilation is not research unless you give a running link in the compilation, or you see for example, sometimes people get credit for edited volumes. But the role of the editor is quite tough, you know. One is in appointing the authors or sending word to the authors, subsplitting the themes into different chapters, seeing that these themes are interwoven into a coherent idea, and writing that long editorial. So, it is like this compilation is put it into a framework or context, and the reader is guided on to appreciate the content. So, that is research. That is the original contribution that the editor makes. In addition to editing and giving sense, making sense out of all the materials which come, editor's job is the worst job. So, definitely, of course, I think I've answered your question. So, I don't see anything wrong with the internet material, but the problem is who authenticates these materials, which sources are giving this material. And today you visit the site, 2 days later when you visit, materials would have changed. That's why date of access, time of access is very important. Then how you recast that material, I'm going to talk about it. Martha Minow, the Harvard Dean, talks about 2 possibilities, restatement and recasting of the existing data in doctrinal research. We'll come to that once we establish the basics. So, what is legal research? How is, generally we talked about research, now legal research. Automatically the word legal will connote many things, mainly to do with law. So, what of law? Always we see law as rules, regulations. But law is not just rule and regulation, law also has other facets, for example, principles. Law has got theories, concepts, doctrines. Law has got rules in the form of legislations, enactments, you know, we have the subordinate legislation, supreme legislation. In addition to that, there are legal institutions, legal problems, cases, and questions or issues, or a combination of all of them. Now there are a few who are pursuing PhD in this group, so one of you can tell me about your topic, and you can tell me, is it only the rules, is it the principle, is it the concept, is it the theory, what is it? So any one of you who is pursuing PhD can.
It's a combination of all of.
Your topic is related?
Non-forming assets, public sector banks in India.
Okay, so what is the, let us just apply the idea, what is the rule there, which legislation you are dealing with?
The DRT
Act.
and
then, so, yeah, SURFACE. And what are the principles you are looking at?
the principles of recovery.
Very good.
Principles of debt involved in it, as to what is a debt,
Great,
when
yeah.
does it become a debt.
What are the concepts, theories and doctrines?
The principles which were applicable earlier, how the it all came to DRT, how the jurisprudence evolved with respect to recovery of loans.
What is the title of your thesis? Read the title.
It's a critical study of non-performing assets of public sector banks in India.
So, non-performing assets itself is a concept which needs to be elaborated. From where did it come? How did it change over a period of time? And then the very existence of public sector, the banks. So, there is a lot of data which is coming in from the banking field itself. The statistics and there are other things. The way you recast will be within the framework of this concept. Then decided cases, then the institution, debt recovery tribunal and its working, the problems, issues or questions which are faced. So you know that her research involves combination of some or all of these elements. Maybe there are one or two which are not there in her research. Is there anybody else who wants to try?
Where can we put hypothesis, madam?
Yeah.
Where can we put hypothesis?
In doctrinal research, we normally do not encourage hypothesis. We always proceed in doctrinal research on the basis of research questions. However, hypothesis is not ruled out, but it looks ridiculous, so we call it a pseudo-hypothesis. For example, you say that, let us say there is the relationship between conservation and intellectual property rights is dialectical, if I say. What is dialectical? You have a thesis, antithesis, which finally leads to synthesis. So, if you are looking at property rights in life, which is intellectual property rights, and if you are looking at the conservation of life, the two are diagonally opposed to each other. Because if you want to protect life, then you should not give property rights in life. However, intellectual property rights serve a larger purpose of incentivizing innovation and original research. And these researchers are supposed to bring more welfare to the society. So there is an inherent value conflict which is there. So if I were to synthesize an argument in support of intellectual property in life forms, then I have to resolve this dialectic between conservation and intellectual property, right? And I have to generate an argument. I have to show it with evidences or data. Okay. So I say the relationship between intellectual property rights and conservation of life is dialectical. This is my main hypothesis. I say pseudo because I am working with doctrinal data. I am not showing any variation or any causal or correlation between variables within that. There are no variables here, isn't it? The variables, the independent variable, dependent variable in a doctrinal research is very difficult to correlate. So what I am showing is a kind of relationship between these concepts. That's all I can do. So that is why we say a kind of pseudo-hypothesis. I would call it as a proposition. A hypothesis basically is a proposition. It's a statement with the generalizability, right? And when the generalizability is proven with data, it becomes a theory. So that way we can infuse hypothesis in order to make the research look good. Otherwise, usually in doctrinal research, we don't use hypothesis approach. We use the research question approach or proposition approach or argument approach. You pick out any article from Oxford Journal of Legal Studies or Harvard Law Review, look for a hypothesis, look for a research question, look for methodological proposition, nothing is there. Because doctrinal research, it is assumed need not have this. This I told you in the morning, this is a tradition which is handed over to us as a legacy. But in India, we are trying to bring it in. It is not only in India. I was reading a very interesting article by Terry Hutchinson, who is a lead figure on doctrinal research in recent years. She is a professor in Queen's University of Technology, Queensland University of Technology. She talks about how her 3 sample studies. One was with the law reform reports of Australia. Second was about second was on how a particular type of articles relating to criminal in a given journal was presented. And the third was PhD research. In all these, more than 30% of the cases were those where students somehow tried to bring in, or writers somehow tried to bring in some kind of social sciences method into legal research. So slowly the tendency to put legal research in a methodological format, borrowing or drawing on the theoretical research from social sciences is increasing, although not a big proportion. She says about 30% of that criminal law research that she was talking about in journals connected to some or other kind of social science method, but she also cautions most of the data that they drew their premises from were from the newspapers. Now this is the problem. When you are doing doctoral research, you are depending on library based research, secondary research, and we all know how newspapers write. Today they write something, more than 50% of the cases they apologize later on, because that time in the hurry, because you must understand the philosophy between researcher like us and newspaper reporter are diagonally opposite. The faster you get, it has a news value, and once the time passes, it becomes stale. It loses news value. So newsworthiness vis-a-vis truth search. So truth becomes a casualty. This is what we wrote. I mean, I was teaching media studies for some time. So there we were talking about how truth is a casualty, especially in political communication related to war. Embedded journalism and all these kinds of concepts. Anyway, that's out of context here. But I wanted to show how doctrinal research not insisting on methodology or feeling shy or stopping short of mentioning the methodology may have other ripple effects which may not be so welcome in a systematic research. For example, I insist when I guide students that you try to make your research, one of the quality parameters is comprehensiveness of data, recency of data, relevance of data, and then we have the other concept of profundity, originality, those other indicators of excellence you have to follow. So purely library-based research may have all these kinds of impact. Then how do you do library-based research? Isn't court-based research a library-based research? Essentially, today you can have thousands of case laws taken from the court or taken from a particular news report or law report, but you can then put a time frame, just like how in sampling we say that in a stratified random sampling method we use from different strata 10 or 20 respondents, or if you are using probability sampling, then in the given universe those who are volunteering or those who are easily available will come to you and you will go to them and you will collect. So here we have these numbers, we have fixed the universe. Like that, even in doctrinal research you can have that logic, that of last 5 years only, last 10 years only. My data cutoff point is till February, whereas the author is writing, the researcher is writing the report in the month of June, so the data cutoff point has been this. So write all of this in your methodology section, so that your examiner or your reader is very clear of your limits and scope. Am I clear? Yeah. So you had some example, please.
Yeah, my PhD topic is water pollution, judicial approach in India.
Very good. Okay.
So in that topic, ma'am, all elements of this is there. Like
Rules are there, principles are
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
concepts are there.
Yeah, exactly.
It is one area. Water pollution has got legal control, but the treatment of water in legality has been of again salami approach. It's a fragmented
Yeah.
approach, because water as a resource is indivisible, but water's treatment has been divided treatment. Like its conservation has been, the conservation dimension of water has been treated differently compared to the pollution dimension. So if you are looking at only on pollution, it is such a fragmented approach in the law. I am not saying you are right in treating it. For example, today can you speak of water pollution without speaking of water tables? So water tables being polluted because of the surface activity, the activity on the land surface. So all these scientific dimensions we have to see. Water is one area in legal research which has got 6 disciplines coming in. This is what I realized when I was doing a small study. Like hydro engineering, electricity, then town planning, Then we had, what else we have? Environmental dimensions, forest laws. So multiple laws and multiple dimensions, multiple expertise have to be looked into. And in water pollution also, the approach of the law has been weak compared to approach of policy, and policy has not been known to people also, and there is no what we call justiciable right in that. So that's the limitation that we observed. But pollution versus conservation has been the major dividing factor in water laws. So it can come somewhere in your literature review. So that means that you are looking at, in water pollution we have plenty of decided cases, we have legal institutions, but water tribunal per se is something that needs to be looked into, and water as a human right, water as a fundamental right, unlike in South Africa and some of those jurisdictions, doesn't exist in India. So those are all the issues.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
don't you think it is the nature of research that will dictate the requirement of hypothesis in case of doctrinal research, whether it is exploratory, explanatory, or maybe any other descriptive
See,
research?
that is again, where do we talk about, I mean, in doctrinal research itself is a methodology. Within that, whether it is exploratory, whether it is, I mean, doctrinal approach can be distinguished in terms of descriptive, evaluative, futuristic. These prognostic, these are the three approaches. I don't think exploratory and doctrinal can go together unless you are using the combined method of research, combining it with
Whether the Supreme Court has deviated from its earlier stance before 1991,
that is not exploratory because the past is already there.
this is explanatory.
Explanatory, yeah,
Right.
explanatory or descriptive.
It has variables. So don't you think in that case hypothesis is required or not required?
Those variables again are conceptual. What is a variable? Variable you have to observe, isn't it? You have to empirically validate. What is empiricism? Empiricism is where you use the sense, all your five sense organs, isn't it? So what is there to use? You are reading and you are assuming. But you are creating that essential relationship, so it's a research. Now that is the distinction that some of the hard and fast scholars of doctrinal methodology make. That if you are using such methodology, then it is a social science methodology which is being read into doctrinal methodology. So we are not purists, we don't want to exclude humanities or social science approach, but because now within doctrinal approaches, these approaches have been hybridized. But essentially it's a social science method, the content analysis methodology.
No in social science.
Yes and no. Law is treated as part of social science in some academic approaches, but law is distinct by itself in majority of the approaches, which are law specific. That's why as I progress further, one of the arguments that I find very relevant and very convincing is that doctrinal methodology as a legal research approach is the methodology which requires sharp and rigorous training to understand and appreciate the anatomy of law. Like for example, the reason within the law, assumptions within the law, the argumentation within the law, and the logic within the law. For example, if you are trying to look at a legislation and analyzing that legislation, forget about impact assessment, that is a consequence of the legislation. If you are looking at the text of the legislation and you are analyzing the text of the legislation, what are you looking at in pure doctrinal research? Have you read any article in, not EPW, EPW is more of interdisciplinary journal, but Oxford Journal of Legal Studies, yeah, Harvard Journal or Cambridge Journal, how do they analyze? Sometimes I always feel that it is more of playing with words, what Dr. Bajpai was saying. You have certain opinion, you have certain description, and that you are advancing. This is what you feel. But if you read twice or thrice, you will realize that they are exposing the incoherence. They are exposing the logical fallacies which are inherent within that piece of legislation or within that judgment. For example, we had the Sarla Mudgal judgment and Shah Banu judgment. Shah Banu to Sarla Mudgal, there were a big number of cases, not much different in impact or ratio. But if you were to see it from the point of view of multiculturalism and gender equality, now what are you doing there? You are not just seeing the law. You are using social science here. You are using the liberal theory. You are using the approaches from politics as well as sociology, feminism. So you are creating a framework through which you are measuring or analyzing, or you are, as sir was saying, you are trying to find a pattern. You are trying to find a trend. Similarly, when you are taking a set of case laws related to a particular issue, you may see the pattern changing. According to strict doctrinal legal researchers, this is not doctrinal research. This is again applying methodology from the historiography or from content analysis or from sociology to law. So what is strict doctrinal analysis in law? For example, if you are analyzing the case law, a case law is there and you are analyzing that case law and you are showing how that particular case has deviated from the previous precedent, and do you agree with the holding of the judge or not? Is the holding of the judge, the decision and the reason given to the judge derived in a very logical fashion, and is that logic flawed in any part? Is there a wrong selection of the fact, or is there ignorance of a crucial fact while arriving at the decision? That is pure doctrinal research. While framing the legislation, is there any part which is ignored? I was telling you, Clinical Establishment Act of West Bengal smacks of Obamacare in many points, but then it doesn't deal with the integrative medicine dimension. People's right to opt for treatment. Not only in the, there's a predominant allopathic bias in that legislation. So, to read that, you have to have an idea of the present reality. You have to have the idea of parallel legislations, like Maharashtra legislation may be one example, but Bengal legislation is better than Maharashtra legislation as far as patient centricity is concerned. As far as reality of practice is concerned, Maharashtra legislation is better. Karnataka legislation is only dealing with the private sector. It doesn't have anything to do with the government sector. West Bengal legislation deals with that. So, when you keep these three legislations and you're trying to do a comparative view, you have to have your measurement rod, isn't it? Or your measuring criteria. Those measuring criteria come from where in doctrinal research? Literature review. So when you are analyzing a legislation also, you can do it from within. Doctrinal research is done from within, then that is a pure legal doctrinal research. Doctrinal research is done with the Archimedean space that you derive from other disciplines, which is done from outside, like how I was giving the example, which comes from a theory, which comes from other disciplines. Right? So, when he is talking about performance index is from which discipline? Management discipline. From the management discipline, particularly human resource management, you are bringing the concept of performance index or performance evaluation. Human resource performance, we call it as performance management as a dimension in human resource management. So, often law has enriched itself. Law has been enriched by this kind of a theoretical, doctrinal input, but it is not purely legal. So, if we were to do purely legal analysis of a legislation, what are the criteria that we would use? One is splitting the legislation, like how for human body we say face, thorax, legs, limbs, etc. Like that in a legislation there is a face, the title, the preamble, the objective, applicability, scope, and then the definitions. After the definitions we come to explanation on the various bodies or authorities within the legislation, processes or rules, and then we try to find out which is the, go back to Benthamite theory, the remedy that the legislation wants to advance, the malady that the legislation wants to suppress. Can you apply that to a given legislation and precisely locate it? You have done your doctrinal research. And thereafter, maybe second part of your analysis can see how this legislation draws parallels. If I am talking about clinical establishment bill or clinical establishment act, I gave you the examples. I can compare it within India, I can even compare it with Obamacare, I can compare it with the NHS in UK. NHS in UK talks about patient centricity. Obamacare talks about the patients who cannot afford what kind of protection you should give. So this legislation seems to be replacing some parts of the legislation from there, but ignoring the diversity that is present in India itself, and ignoring certain facts while drafting the legislation. So this is how you see the most interesting aspect of legislative analysis as part of the doctrinal research. So it depends on, you can draw a tiger on its own in a very small nano form also. You can draw it with its cubs. You can draw it in the context of trees, so that tiger's majesty is enhanced. So there are different canvases within which you can conduct this kind of a research. I hope I have made it clear. Now in case analysis, we'll go back to legislative and case analysis. In case analysis, you can do one case analysis and investigate deeper into the issue that is addressed in that case. Or you can do that case analysis as a window to show how the judge has analogically deduced the principles. What is analogical deduction? Similar cases of the past, how the judge has read. Has there been a wrong reading of any of the cases in arriving at a conclusion, or is there a deviation from the past? S.N. Jain's article, which I am going to give you from the Indian Law Institute publication, S.N. Jain talks about how Supreme Court itself has overruled its own precedents over a period of time when situation has changed, when times have changed. Yeah.
Now, these days we are seeing that in Supreme Court, 1 year we are having some judgment, the next year we are having some, entirely different, entirely opposite judgment from the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So we are not capable of, having a stream of, standardized theory by the Supreme Court.
That's a good observation, but as a lawyer we should not make those observations, because for a person on the street, yes, related to that issue the judgment is different. But as a law student, when you read the judgment, you will see the hair-splitting distinction in the facts.
Especially with respect to 498 cases.
Yeah.
Because we did one study of UNFPA, and in that we were going through the Ravi cases,
Yeah.
cases. So we were not finding any coherence in the judgments within the last 10 years. So,
I spoke to judges on this because I was on the commission which recommended that 498A should be continued. So, because there was so much resistance because of these judges' biases and things like that. We saw the bias where one of very learned judges, Talveer Bhandari in Preeti Gupta case, talks about how the educated girls are not adjusting in in-laws' house. That kind of sentence is there in the judgment, but then it has a context. The context is like this. The educated girls are more equipped in terms of information and control over the wealth of the in-laws. So when they take away their suitcases, there have been umpteen number of cases where 4 suitcases belonging to the in-laws also has been taken away. That has been recorded in the judgment. So in the outcome might look disturbing, but case to case basis, the crucial fact that is what ratio decidendi analysis is, which is the fact which makes that conclusion to be arrived at, because it is a mixed fact and law relationship which is reflected in the holding of the judgment, isn't it? So this is what, as law students, we should not speak like people on the street, because people on the street will not be trained in the methodology of splitting a judgment and seeing the IRAC method. All of you are familiar with the IRAC method, isn't it? Issues, rules, analysis and conclusion. Analysis is where the judge connects the rule to the issue or facts in the case, and then try to arrange the relationship between facts and identifies the most crucial fact. Most crucial fact or the supreme evidence among the number of evidences which are available. So documentary evidence most of the time seems to play a crucial role, isn't it? If that suitcase is shown to be the suitcase which is belonging to the in-laws in a lawful manner with the proper evidence, can the judge ignore? Now that is where our way of looking at things is much more autonomous and broad and more telling for the future, whereas judges' way of looking at things are fettered or limited by the evidences, by the demands of the parties and the claims of the parties and the comparative rights which are visible in the form of evidence. Do we get that? So let us not lose our focus on judges' research, lawyers' research, in terms of having their own limitations and regretting that academic research is not as good as judges' research or lawyers' research. I don't know how many of you have read about the evolution of the right to privacy. Concept of right to privacy came into the realm of fundamental rights by the legal research of Harvard professors. Judges took note of that and they incorporated in the judgment. So this is how academic research has enhanced and elaborated the possibility of rights discourses. Many a times in India, social justice discourses, I mean, lot of our old symbiosis journals were borrowed by Justice Sinha when he was giving certain judgments, because the jurisprudential basis was evolved from the kind of scholarly articles which are written by some of the lawyers. So very few judges have always looked at these writings. Maybe I have not done a very systematic research. It would be worthwhile in India to look into how far judges have looked into Indian academic research. I have seen judges looking into Harvard Law Review and other kinds of things. See, I'll tell you how we are flawed sometimes in academic assumption of doctrinal approach. When I was on the commission, we had this whole issue of age of consent. So we came to know that more than 54% of marriages in India happen at an underage time. Particularly girls are less than 16, 54%. So I was arguing with the judge. Then why can't we declare those marriages, then why can't we immediately legislate and make all those marriages which are underage marriages as illegal? Judge immediately said that it has a consequence for the children. And see, the larger consequence which is seen comes from empirical experience. So we have to train ourselves, even though we are doing doctrinal research, our alertness is there. That's why when I am going ahead, I'll tell you what are the competencies which are required for doctrinal research. It will make it very clear. You have to have very thorough reading of every bit of concept which is coming there. You have to read it from all 360-degree kind of view. Otherwise, don't venture into doctrinal research, or if you venture, it will remain limited. There will be logical flaws, fallacies within the propositions that you make. So it is safer to have an explanatory, interpretative research rather than a kind of research where you advance a fundamental theory. When you are trying to advance fundamental theory, these problems may come unless you have paid attention to all the details and facts. So purpose are also a wide variety of purposes for which we do the research. Ascertaining the nature of the law, specific situation, utility, adequacy, efficacy. Like for example, we may do doctrinal research in order to expose the protection of rights of children, situation of children. Like today I was telling you, neurobiology and juvenile delinquency interrelationship. Or neurobiology being used as an evidence to show how neuroshock, for example, if a person has incurred due to a tort occurrence, then in establishing the compensation, how far such medical evidence could be useful. Psychiatric treatment evidences have been used in establishing the harassment impact in case of workplace as well. I don't know how many of you you are aware of this. If somebody has undergone, the whole principle of harassment as a factor to be considered under the law came from Sweden, and in Sweden it evolved out of the collaboration between psychiatrists and lawyers. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. So from there the whole idea of workplace harassment evolved, and then sexual harassment of workplace at workplace was a combination of the two, gender equality and this equality dimension and this. Anyway, examine the law established by courts to determine the scope in situation, evaluate the approaches, applicable law, dynamic character of law. This could be also the focus. Composition of legal institution, its efficacy, its success, its failure. For example, there was one student of Delhi University who had done a research on Central Administrative Tribunal's approach, and he had seen how asystematic means lack of systems resulted in delays, and how the outcome was very predictable. There was not much of an impact because there were delays. So he was showing it with the data, but the data were not empirical data, like they were gleaned from the website of CAT. So this is purely doctrinal research where you sit in the library. The definition of doctrinal research is library-based research. But then there is this Christopher Langdell. How many of you know about his name? Who is this Langdell guy? He is the guy who introduced the case law method, Harvard case law method, Christopher Langdell. He says that for a law researcher, lab is the library. Library is the lab. Our lab is the library, he says. And he says that for a researcher in legal science, he doesn't call law as a discipline, he calls it as legal science. Why legal science? Because just like how physicist questions the assumptions or culls the theory out of physical phenomena, a lawyer culls doctrinal precepts or principles out of the phenomena of rules and behavior. So he never agreed that law is anything less of a science, and he never agreed with the idea that law has to fall back upon others' shoulders to derive a methodology. Such was the belief and puritanism with which they all approached law or legal research. Whereas today the situation has changed, I told you. So legal research for justice, it is about asking the rights question, it is about looking at the world with open inquiring mind, and it is also about joining forces with other scholars, and it is about values, rights, justice, framework. I hope this introduction is clear and clarity. After that, we know that in approaches to legal research, two broad approaches, the doctrinal and the non-doctrinal or the so-called empirical legal study. Our scope is only for doctrinal. Doctrinal research has been the most conventional approach to legal research. It's also hailed as, or rather condemned as, armchair research because, again, I told you, you present the new knowledge ideas or suggest reform. You evaluate the earlier concepts for efficacy by using the ideas of justice, fairness, protection of rights, freedom, liberty, equality, So this is how doctrinal research proceeds. Now, what is the definition of doctrinal research? A research which provides a systematic exposition of the rules. You were telling me about explanatory of the rules governing a particular legal category. Analyzing the relationship between rules. If any of you have read Professor Ishwar Bhatt's book on interrelationship between fundamental rights. If one were to draw a model of Indian Constitution's Part 3, enumeration of fundamental rights, if that model were to be a flow chart model, or if it were to be a kind of organic, we call it as a graphic model, what right will you put as the supreme right? And which right will be derivative right out of this supreme right? And how many new rights have been derived out of this supreme right? Now that kind of a model building within the concepts is a doctrinal research, isn't it? I mean, sir did not dwell on the model. I remember it was more of a descriptive, explanatory kind of exposition that sir has given. So read that book. So relationship between rules. Explain, we can give another example. Constitutionality of intellectual property rights in pharmaceutical products. Or a human rights critique of, one of my students did, human rights critique of healthcare in relation to third gender. How do you view that? So, she never visited or met any third gender person, but based on the evidences that she was able to glean from the medical literature and from the reports of certain hospitals and from the biographies of certain third gender people and NGOs relating to third gender, she was able to establish that. So you get that?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
this predicts the future developments could be a sort of exploratory, as in a future law that could be passed in an area like e-commerce sector, for example.
It could be, as he said. Do you call future one as exploratory? See, what is exploration? You visit an unknown territory and you write your experience so that your future visitors will be able to design a research and do a fully fledged research. So exploratory research is a baby research. Whereas futuristic, when you are trying to talk about the future development, you may be recommending reforms, or you may be prognostic, that if this way it continues, these problems may come. That is prognosis, predictive. predictive research. Exploratory is your exploration. It's a untouched area of research where you. That is why in exploratory research, there is no rigor of method. People are very liberal when you are telling exploratory research. When they are evaluating your thesis, they are little liberal because you are only exploring. But if you are telling it's a descriptive research which is using this method, then they will use all kinds of review methods to see whether you have been accurate or not. I hope that word exploration is a kind of initial research. You do it with 10 samples or 50 samples, and then in your conclusion you say that future research could be done in this way, and you may say with 1,000 samples, 100 samples, 4 different regions, 3 different countries. So that is the difference. Now, you know the name Richard Posner from the Critical Law School. Posner says that after the judges have given the decision, they leave a lot of messy work. And there is so much mess left for cleanup by academicians for restatement of law, for critique of law, or to identify new rules. So this is exactly what a doctrinal researcher engages with. So within the judgment there are multiple things, as Sir was saying, that you can draw hypotheses out of the obiter dicta. Okay, ratio decidendi will give you the clue whether the logic is correct, reasoning is correct, argumentation is correct. But whatever is left out of that, for example, you are talking about the rights of this Shabano, of right to maintenance beyond iddat. Okay, and there you also say the right to live with dignity, and you are bringing fundamental rights, so family law versus constitutional law. And then you talk about need for uniform civil code, and then that is touching Article 44 and giving direction to the government, and then talking about work of the Law Commission later on. I mean, a lot of things are triggered by the messy work that the judges leave, and that is for the academic to engage and to start exploring and then start expounding. I hope that's clear to you. Yeah. Now, doctoral research is also considered as fundamental research because it is a research to secure a deeper understanding of law as a social phenomenon. This is where what he says becomes important. Ideally, every lawyer should develop a sociological insight. A social insight. That's why social engineering. Research on historical, philosophical, linguistic, economic, social and political implications of law. So Sir is going to talk about the philosophical approaches to doctrinal research. So that will make it very clear. The examples that we are going to take will give you further insights. So now comes our Landell. He talks about library as a lab of doctrinal research in legal science. He doesn't call it just law. So what is doctrinal research? It is to instruct a lesson or a precept. So doctrinal research is instructive research. It is talking about what is to be learned from this judgment, what is to be seen, what does it show, what does it convey. So that exploration is doctrinal research. It is in a legal science. Now, what is this legal science? Legal science is systematic and ordered exposition of legal doctrine out of the commentary of jurists. Okay, these jurists may be multiple in number. These jurists may be judges. Whether jurists are only judges? No, they may be judges, they may be expert commentators, they may be academics. So, those who are trained in law. Legal researcher takes one or series of legal propositions at the starting point and then researches. Now, legal doctrine. We said that legal doctrine is the essence of doctrinal research. That means it includes principles, doctrines, concepts, either for justifying it or to find the reasoning in a given legal text while analyzing the legal text or legal phenomenon. So you first do the legal literature review in the topic that you have chosen to find out what is done and what is not done. What is not done becomes the basis of your research objective, research question, and then you start identifying the methodology. Means what extent of data you have to gather, what is the kind of, you have to have, research design is not just one step or two step, you have to conceive the entire research at that stage. So what are those stages? You locate the decision, so you first locate the law. Okay, first step is to locate the decision. the legislation and secondary discussion about that, what other scholars have said, that also. And then you analyze those materials, primary sources of case and legislation. Now, analyzing the material is a trained expertise. I told you how to, what you call, cut open legal anatomy, we call it. How to cut open the case law, how to cut open the legislation. I gave you the example of the legislation. In case law also I gave you the example, IRAC analysis. So based on that, you cut it and you see which social reality, that is the issue, which rule and which argumentation has been coming in front of the judge. How did the judge analyze? Which facts were considered as crucial facts and how did the ratio get developed? How did the judge settle the dispute or conflict between the parties? So then you link it to the known body of law. For example, if it is a dispute which is resolved under IP, within that we go in depth. Is that IP relating to computers or is it relating to a living matter, gene for example, human gene, or is it related to plant material? And then you see how various legislations or earlier decisions have come in that line. Whether this decision is a deviation from that, how does it differ and why did it differ? Like 498A, series of cases. Why did it differ in certain cases? What new facts have been discovered? So is there a real misuse or is it only in certain cases that people have made use of this for their material advantage? So certain parameters and certain criteria you develop out of your reading and then you analyze the decision which is there and then formulate a conclusion and then write the entire report. So this is how doctrinal research proceeds. Yeah.
How would you qualify the term primary sources of the case or case?
Primary sources of case and legislation means entire text of the case. See, I may come upon summarized version of the case in a reporter. Instead of that, I'll go to the court's website. Or I will go to the authentic report where the full version of the case is given. These days if you read Manu Patra, a truncated version of the case is given. So primary sources of the case in this case means the authentic report. And in case of legislation also gazetted version of the legislation. Not just something which is hand-picked and written by other authors. The danger in the library is you may have hand-picked. See, India Qanun, anybody has read India Qanun's materials, I always compare India Qanun with the other sources. There is a lot of discrepancy. That is why authentication is very important because you are exclusively depending on print material or material which is archived or material which is there in the database. So there you have to be extremely careful. That's why we say primary material. Okay, then we have the difference. This is Anurul Yakin's exposition where he talks about rational explanation, discussion, argument and opinion, obtaining, evaluating information on systematic basis. Systematic will mean chronological order, it will mean connected. So this is just as a clue to some of you who are new to research. We always draw something called a mind map. Do you know about mind mapping? Anybody who is trained in that? How do you draw a mind map? The linkages between different concepts, the materials related to that. So that kind of writing and thinking and splitting and creating relationships between various concepts and connected materials, at the end you do it for 2 to 3 days. Then the brain is able to ascertain the pattern between them and the sentences emerge and the connections become clear to you. Now this kind of a mind mapping can be circular or they can be flowchart kind of mind map. We call them as spider diagrams, just like how spider web is there, the web diagram, or you can use the linear diagram to connect the various links in the given concept. When you split open a case or when you split open a legislation and then you start reading secondary literature by other authors which have come just before that. Now there is a caution here, since you are depending exclusively on library, always also look at the quality of data that you use. The quality of data should come from very good journals or jurists who have already established as experts in that field. So try to validate that. Anything in the Google, anything in India today cannot pass off as source or data. Therefore in doctrinal research, it is not only the quality, it is not only the quantity and the accuracy of the data, but also the quality of data. One clue is Global Index to Legal Periodical Indexed Journal Data. I mean, right now we look at Westlaw, we look at Social Science Index or Scientific Index journals, etc. Thomson Reuters, these are some of the sources from which you have to pick the journals and you have to validate. Then only the world-class research thing. I mean, there is a little bit of racket there. No Thomson Reuters journal will accept your article unless you have cited some Thomson Reuters. So that is also a tactic that you have to use. Publication is a different aspect altogether. But then to see that your research is following the rigor of a good doctoral research, it's better you have this information in your availability. So in social vehicle research, that is where hypothesis concept is used, because it is a generalization which has to be verified by evidence and proof. It's considered as more scientific because science depends on empirical sense experience. It uncovers the truth, etc. So that is considered as original research compared to doctrinal research. But Langdale kind of people say that legal science itself is original and anything that is doctrinal only is original as far as law is concerned. Let's judiciously choose between the two so that one enriches the other. That is where we approach policy research, law research in terms of reforms as a multi-method research, where we use sociological research, we use historical research, philosophical research to validate and enrich and enhance the research and the quality of data that we use and the conclusions and their impact on larger social phenomena. Now, your understanding of doctrinal research, I told you, one is locating the law, which law is relevant. Second is analyzing the text which you have located. I have given you already the anatomy approach. Now there are two approaches. One is principles and rules and second is the professional setting of law. When we are looking at law, it's very important that we distinguish it from the social analysis or political analysis, because legal analysis is legal per se. It is an in-depth inward kind of journey. You have to know the logic of the law, how rules are. So it's constant forward and backward kind of journey. Forward where you apply your knowledge as a student of law in understanding, and while writing you have to apply it as if you are an expert. So what helps you in this? Read as much doctrinal research as possible from lead journals. How people have developed their argument, how they have put their propositions forth, how they have arranged their analysis. That is going to really help you. For example, we used the second approach where we use the external source than the internal inherent legal content. For example, we have two choices. I could have simply analyzed the Sarla Mudgal case. Instead of that, what I do, I analyze the case, but I top it up with the approach towards gender equality and multiculturalism. And then I end it up with the debate on uniform civil code as a kind of unending project in India. So that could be one simple analysis that I could do. Now when I do, internal element is analyzing the Sarla Mudgal case. The external element in this doctrinal research is the theory that I draw from the multiculturalism, that is from the liberalism group of theories. And the conclusion that I draw is the law reform and policy directions. So in one research, you have to decide, as he correctly said, what is the framework that you want to adopt. That's why mind mapping is very important. Feasibility, time frame, resources and access to materials, all these you take into consideration and finalize your research. Now what kind of doctoral research exists? I already told you, Martha Minow, the Dean of Harvard Law School, talks about doctrinal restatement, where you reorganize the case law into coherent categories. I told you, logically similar cases you bring together and reorganize them. Is it from the bygone days, or is it last 5 years, or is it in the post-globalization era, or is it related to one theme of labor law, or one theme of gender equality, or one aspect of feminist doctrine flowing through the cases? One more Sir's article, Constitutional Feminism. He draws how Supreme Court has reflected various Supreme Court cases, he connects to the concept of gender equality and feminist theory, and he shows how in various cases Supreme Court has made use of this philosophy. So you can have that kind of a framework applied to the case laws. That is exactly doctrinal restatement. And then you have another one which is very interesting, recasting. She uses the second one, which is gathering more than one line of cases across doctrinal fields. For example, interaction between criminal law and constitutional law, and show why they belong together and what are the discrepancies. If Justice Verma was giving the Vishaka decision, he could have simply given it in terms of inherent powers of the court. But why did he bring international human rights, international covenant on civil and political rights, and talked about the right to compensation? Nilamati Bera case, simply they could have put it as abuse by the police, and that the police was unjustified in the death of that boy, they were responsible. But why did they talk about compensation by the state? Or Rudal Shah case. Now that is where jurisprudence evolves, and when they evolve, you pick that point and then you can take a little comparative deviation to show how such philosophy has evolved across the world. Your thematic analysis could be only on state's liability for custodial death, so this is how other empirical work also can come in. So that is where you may test a proposition. You may create an argument. For example, I created an argument that in relation to interpretation of CEDAW, Convention on Elimination on all forms of discrimination against women, on women's entitlement to religious offices in India. The right to worship and all came much later. We published an article on the Sabarimala case in the background, and subsequently in terms of how religion and gender equality conflict has been there. We use the theory, the tradition and modernity polarity. So we showed how judges' minds are caught up in this tradition modernity polarity, and how judges have taken refuge under constitutionalism to resolve such opposite pulling forces, and we have shown it with a series of decisions. Now this kind of a proposition testing, theory testing, validating, negating can be done by using the doctrinal method. Is that clear till now to everybody? Can you think of such a research in your area? Yeah.
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
When we talk about doctrinal research, don't you think that it has more tendency of being a biased research? Because when a researcher is reading or interpreting the literature, the cases, he or she already has a preconceived idea.
Yeah.
And the researcher would only be searching for those facts or those data which he or she wants to prove. So generally, it is, according to me, it's more biased.
I'll give you a simple example. A physicist, what example I can give? A physicist says that the physicist or physical chemistry person says that if this is the bottle and if I heat up the water expands. There is already an established theory. And I start my article saying that this bottle's water will expand if I heat it up. I don't have to explain because it is already established and that theory has not been disproved. Similarly, when I am analyzing a case law, the methodology has already been established. Some of us may do irresponsible research, but generally, once we enter the field of research and we dare to publish something, it is assumed that you are thoroughly trained in that skill. Am I right, sir? There is no question of being biased, because an outsider cannot call me biased, because as a lawyer I am trained in this methodology of legal science on how to spot the rule, how to find the content of the rule. Now, how do you find the content of the rule? Break open the rule. When you break open the rule, you see rights, you see duties, you see liabilities, you see correlation and responsibility. Think of the Hofeldian scheme and jural relations. Now, is this something that a sociologist or a criminologist can say that I am doing biased? No, because my discipline has its own precepts. Just like how for a physicist heat and energy and volume are measurements, for me, rights, liabilities, duties are my vocabulary. Is that bias? No. Because that is why he says, Langdale says, it's a legal science. I wish Dr. Bajpayee was here. Because doctrinal research ideally, I mean in its purest sense, is not a biased research. It is in fact the most difficult research if you ask me. Because unless he had studied feminist philosophy for 2 or 3 years rigorously by getting that clarity, he cannot simply apply that theory for the case laws. You know, I hope I made it clear to you. I don't mean to silence you, but I want you to appreciate that I cannot do the legal analysis unless I am trained in this. Unless I know what IRAC is, I cannot break down the case. A newspaper reporter will report the case. You just study. When a crucial decision is given by the Supreme Court, study how the Hindu writes, Express writes, Times writes. Multiple things. Not at all, the legality is not at all understood, impact is not at all understood, very populist way of writing. And today you give that text to anyone in this class, they'll be able to do a better job as a legalistic explanation. I hope I made it clear. Yeah. This is the thing, so be proud of your discipline, don't jump into social science and other things unless you are trying to use it to enhance your legalistic approach. That's how, I mean, our discipline has got its own framework, its own scientificity. But that scientificity is inherent to it. I remember Australian Chief Justice telling me that I was a student of physics and I don't see any difference between jurisprudential analysis and physics theories. They are parallel. They are logically in a similar vein. You are building the jurisprudence. You are building, is there a right? Is there a duty? Who has a duty? Where is the relationship? Why it is not done? Which part did the judge miss? Is there real justice or is there a miscarriage of justice? So applying that kind of deeper insight will require thorough understanding of justice theory, thorough understanding of jurisprudence. Am I clear? The concepts, the methods and the theories are very important to conduct doctrinal research. Not of any theory, legal theory. So have your fundamental reading done very well, then you embark on doctrinal research in your projects. Historical research, etc. you can conduct. Critical projects also. The difference between doctrinal research and all these researches is that some of them answer some parts. Like critical research debunks and it shows how a terminology is biased. The historical research will show the history and the evidence which is used in a customary law or a principle. But doctrinal research looks into the legality of it. That's what is the difference. Similarly, in comparative law, in philosophy of law, a theory will fit the things together and they will explain. So, doctrinal research can be a combination of all these approaches. In Canada also, the Arthur report said that deeper understanding of a social phenomenon is the legal research. So also we had standards which said that doctrinal research will have intellectual and practical skills. It will have the ability to communicate these findings. So these skills you have to cultivate. Writing, understanding. Reform-oriented research is also doctrinal research. Theoretical research is doctrinal research. I think we don't have much time. Therefore, now what is, according to Terry Hutchinson, one of the most important features these times is that there is a lot of interdisciplinary trend. She calls it as eclectic. Like how I said, neurobiology to explain the delinquency. So, it's mainly qualitative, she says, and distinctive. There is a certain discipline, there is a certain standard. Literature review is set as a background. Now, according to her, the other disciplines' data are used in order to enhance the findings or in order to provide a context to the findings. I gave you the idea. You have to explain third gender, you have to explain right to health, and you have to explain how third gender's right to health has been deprived because there are not enough medical protocols in order to ensure the safety of gender conversion surgery. So she was showing it in these kinds of reports where people underwent complications, some died, etc. Or some were going because of the shame involved in it to untrained providers who were advertising in newspapers. So that kind of risk and safety issue she was highlighting. Now that's where human right to life is under threat. So this is how you develop interdisciplinary framework. So this is my final statement. It needs a guiding principle or pseudo hypothesis. I gave you the dialectics example, polarity example. USS's legal hegemony in the competition law across the world or antitrust law, doctrinal assumption. Similarly, in stem cell research, we were showing how the methodology of preservation of the cells, etc., cryogenic, etc., are not in tandem with the international guidelines. Fragmentation to integration. For example, how international law is fragmented in terms of trade law being treated separately, trade and human rights conflicts not being addressed through single convention. So, with the globalization, how this fragmentation remains and integration needs to be achieved. That's one theoretical insight. Similarly, healthcare justice. We developed the concept of healthcare justice with the help of healthcare theories, justice theories, and we were showing how healthcare justice is affordability, accessibility, free healthcare, insurance availability, patient safety. So, developing these parameters, I told you earlier, developing these parameters and applying them to case laws or legislation. One article which was published recently, which I co-authored with my PhD student, was on the Jija Ghosh case. She was disembarked from the air travel, being considered as not fit to travel. It was a private airways. So, how hitherto the disability rights were considered as a charity, but how this has made it to evolve into disabled person being considered as a person with inherent rights, that not a person who should look forward to charity. So this is the argument we raised, and we showed how in that case the entire logic was forthcoming in the judgment. So debunking the law, debunking the judgment, cutting it open and showing it to conform to certain proposition or theory or an insight is the essence of doctrinal research. I hope in your individual research field by now you would have thought of some idea, you would have thought of how to research, and I wish you all the best in this endeavor. Thank you very much. If there is any doubt, you are welcome to ask. I think we are running short.